will say that part of the redemption of that season was that my mother did pass in peace. With much joy, I was able to say all the things I wanted to say. I have no regrets. The way there was certain things I don't, I don't know if she had foresight or if there was something, but like the ways that afterwards were like little gems, like she had taken care of certain things. So I was pleasantly surprised. Like I still felt her taking care of me. And then and I mean, I don't know how weird we want to get, but, and then I would have dreams where she like visitations.
My dad
Okay.
visits me. My dad visits me in my dreams all the time.
And
Yep.
there's dreams where she's in the background. And I think my psyche is trying to work through stuff, right? So there's some dreams where she's like in the background and then you wake up and I feel like, okay, that was like my brain working through some of, like you're working through some stuff still and she's in the background and, whatever. But then there are some dreams where she'd be like, hi. And I'm like, you're not supposed to be here. And she's like, whatever. And, you know, and I'm like, this is, what is happening? Like, why are you here? And she'll just be like, whatever. And I had a lot of those up until the last stream I had like that was oh gosh, I don't even know how 1, 2, 3 years ago, probably 3 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, where it was one of her visitation dreams, because I started to like my psyche, my brain, I don't know how this works. Maybe if one of your listeners is like stuff they can explain, but I stopped being surprised in my dream. My reaction in my dreams was no longer surprise. It was like, oh yeah, hi again, like, okay, great. So we were so we were walking through, like, it looked like this meadow, and we were going on a walk, and it just felt like we were just hanging out. The first few dreams were like her trying to explain that this is not scary. Right.
Yes.
And then I guess by this time it's like, girl, you should be used to this by now, like I'm here. So we're walking through this meadow, it's beautiful, and I don't know, and I said to her, this is going to sound but I said to her, I was like, I really have been praying for a partner, for somebody, and like it has not been working out for me. And I'm like, I'm alone. And I remember one of my many griefs, right? Because with any grief, there are many little griefs that compound and make the big grief. And one of those many little griefs, in addition to my mom passing, was that my mom passed when I was so single and by myself. Like, I don't have anyone else to call on, no one else to, I can't really call my dad. I cannot call on my siblings or all my half siblings. I can't, like, we don't have that kind of, that's not where we are. Where my new address was my Princeton Seminary dorm. That was home now. It was very depressing. And I remember having this distraught thought, like being in an Uber, it was the most morbid thought that I'm like, I'm in this Uber, and if this man kidnaps me, no one will know for weeks, because the person that would immediately know something's wrong if I don't call them in a day or two is no longer on this earth. And it was it was the scariest thought for me. Like, who would know? And so that was another point of contention between me and God. Like, I could take away my person without giving me another person. Like, why would you do this to me? And so I'm on this dream, on this meadow, and I'm telling her, like, it's not working for me. Like, there's no one at Princeton Seminary. There's no one around here. Like, I am in a black hole of like non-eligible. Like, and it's not just about like, oh, someone to take pictures with and post online. It's the companionship. Like, I feel alone. This does not feel right, And I say to her, so you think you could put in a good word for me? I was like, you think you can, like, I was like, you see God every day. Every day. Can you I was asking for an intercessor. I was like, it was like asking for a saint, asking for Jesus, asking for someone to pray for you because they're closer to God than you are,
Mm.
like in a metaphysical way. So I said, can you say something for me? Because anytime you prayed for something, I feel like you always got what you asked for.
Mm.
Like, and that's what formed my faith. Like I would watch my mom pray for something and it might not come in the exact form, but it'll come in this form. And it was, yeah, I'm like, and I remember there was a look on her face in the dream, like that was like, you really want me to like go all the way, like really, really deep in there and like face to face ask, and I'm like, yes, please. And then she looks at me and she goes, okay.
Mm.
And that was probably the summer of 2019. I met Darrell September. I
Wow.
met September. Now I didn't think this is my person. Obviously over time you're like, oh shoot, this is my person. But I met him then. And then we started dating a month after, and then I haven't had a dream about her since.
Wow.
He's like, oh, like I haven't had. But another part of me was like, wow, like it almost feels in some way that okay, you are taken care of, and I am very well taken care of by my lovely, lovely partner and husband, Darrell. But it felt like it was like, okay, like I release you to live your life now. You needed me to visit you because you were so alone.
Mm.
And now you are no longer alone in that way. And, you have my blessing to live your life. And I'll have the little, maybe like in the background, that kind of thing. But I haven't had those kinds of um visitations, I like to call them,
Yeah.
since. But those are the little encounters I feel like God graces us with. Do I have a theological framework for what that means, how it's possible, if it's possible? Is it a fragment of my imagination? Sure. Yes to all of it. Yeah, sure. But whatever it was, whether it was a supernatural visitation or it was a fragment of my psyche trying to cope with my grief, the end result was the same, in which I felt cared for.
Yeah.
And it comforted me in that season. And it made me kind of think about how even in death, death is harder for us who are living because we do not have the same access to the person that we loved.
Mm-hmm.
But it made me think, wow, I wonder what the experience is on the other side. Because at least in that little moment, she seemed to know a lot about what's going on. So, those things were reflected in my art and my work. When I tell those stories, when I do CreatioDivina, in this conversation, I feel like there's she doesn't visit me in dreams, but these little moments I can feel a little. I wonder, if I let myself explore that, thought experiment, I wonder if this is a different manifestation of that visitation.
Mm-hmm.
I count it all as God's grace. So
Yeah. I think God is no respecter of our theological frameworks. Honestly, I think that we try to categorize and systematize and fit things in. And God said, all of this is me. All of this exists because I am. All of it. God is present in all of it. Literally, if you think actually like scientifically about the existence of matter, of particles, of physicality, it all had to emerge from God because God is the only constant. God is the only eternal. And whatever you want to call God, force, universe, source, spirit, I don't think God cares. But the fact is that whether God birthed God's self outward and exploded into existence, or became conscious of the self that is I am, or however that worked, all of this material, even the simplest things, are God. They have to be. So I think that I almost see God laughing when we try to fit these frameworks, because it feels to me like God says, I reveal myself to people in the way that they will receive me, because I so deeply desire to have a relationship with them that there's no one who I wouldn't reveal myself to. So whether it's in the rock in the palm of your hand, or the sun on your face, or a visit from your mother in your dream, that's me. I'm present in that.
Yeah. That's one of the biggest lessons. I mean, that's why, my art practice turned a bit more away from me just being an artist in a studio producing art in the world, which there is an element to that. But a lot of my work with BeauFolio has now turned more outward to doing CreatioDivina workshops, which are really designed to allow folks who may not have access to, or normally feel like they have access to, that creative side, to tap into that. Because the thing that is beautiful about art, but also very frustrating about art, is that it is very subjective. We might have general standards of what is beautiful or valuable in general, but that shifts as whatever authority says. And so when someone is creating, there is a moment there where, in our very heady, post-enlightenment, world in which we need to rationalize everything has to be very logical, one of the few spaces where we allow ourselves to not be as logical, beyond maybe religious leaning, which also we use our head a lot to rationalize things, is oftentimes in art. We have collectively accepted that even though a lot of us may consider certain art beautiful, certain art not, whatever it is, that someone is expressing themselves. It's one of the only realms that we have accepted that the rules are allowed to be broken. There are some rules, but they're allowed to be broken. And so when that's why those who may say I'm not an artist are very intimidated by art. I just always am curious that, are we intimidated by making art because 100% because we're afraid that we're going to make something ugly? Or are we intimidated by art because we are afraid that it will reveal to us something that maybe we're not ready to encounter? About ourselves, about what we created, about how we feel about what we create. I mean, there's so many things that happen when you're creating something. And it doesn't even have to be a painting or a sculpture. I mean, anything that we create, you creating this podcast, anything that is a creative output is very risky. Because yes, in some ways there are some objectives about whether something is good art or good, whatever that means. But largely, a conversation like this is very dependent not only on me and you's interaction, but also the interaction of those who are listening and how they're receiving it. So it's a very risky thing to create things and put it out there. We learn a lot about ourselves, about God, the universe, about other people when we're creating in this way. And there's a part of our nature that inherently is like, I don't know if I want to know all of this. So because I don't know if I want to know all this, I'm just not going to engage. I'm going to just believe that this is not for me. So people feel this way about religion. People sometimes feel this way about therapy, like, oh, I ain't trying to go to therapy to have somebody tell me what I feel like I already know about myself. And so, if people were afraid of therapy because they don't want someone, or coaching or spiritual direction because they don't want someone to tell them what they feel like they already know, who doesn't want to go to someplace and be agreed with? You know, like you want to go, you know, who doesn't want to go someplace and be validated? We all know that when we take those kinds of risks in creating, that we risk knowing more about ourselves than we would like to know, because when we know more about ourselves, then I have to make some changes. I can't, you know, I can't, I know too much now. I can't live my life as I was living it. My theology was okay. Now I have this new experience. That faith, that kind of faith that I had, you know, that good enough faith, like now I know that that's not quite enough for this next stage of my life. I have to do something about it. I rather have not known.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So I feel like art has a way of doing that. So in those CreatioDivina moments, I love, you know, when we do the collaborative creating, and then we have space to share with each other. And then that's my favorite part, because I don't have to do nothing. I mean, I have to do a little bit of facilitating and making, you know, asking questions. But when people start talking to each other, they reveal a little bit about themselves, or they get that creepy moment, like, how did you know that this is something I was dealing with? How did you draw that? Like, why? Whoa, you know, it gets, you know, though it's those moments that might make people say, I don't want to do this. I don't want to engage, because I am being revealed in a way that I don't want to be revealed. And there are things being revealed to me that I'm not really ready to, I'm overwhelmed and I don't know what to do with, or I'm not ready to do anything about. And that's okay. You know, it's all in how you interpret it. I could choose to see those dreams as my psyche just doing its thing and move on with life and not think anything of it. Or I can choose to see it as, wow, God's grace is so big that God has allowed me to have a little bit of additional time with my mom in a time where I felt very alone.
Yeah.
And I have the option to take in that experience and decide for myself what it is and how I'm going to allow it to form me. So I could have taken my mom's death and just been like, well, I'm just going to double down and work harder at something that I was soul sucking, which, you know, in some ways I did. So I'm not exempt from it, you know, or I could say, wait a second, I had this experience. I'm suddenly not very satisfied with how I had been planning or living my life. Gosh, it's going to take a lot of effort to change it, but what's my next faithful step? And for me, it was, well, I'm going to be gone out of this job in a month anyway. You know, so
Yeah.
we all have those moments. And we get to be creative with how we interpret them and how we apply them, and how we let them impact our life.
I do have to say that when you're doing CreatioDivina and people are sharing, I think from the opposite perspective, I think you're doing something very active in that time. And I think that that space that you create in which people can share so vulnerably, that is a very active space that you knit this energetically safe container for people. And in that time, you're holding this sacred container in which that can blossom and be birthed. So I think there's something very active about what you're doing. It's like a prayerful presence.
Thank you for
Yeah.
that. And I'll say the same for you and your work. And you know, one of the things that made me really excited to come on this podcast is that, well, one, your energy is just so inviting and calm, and you're such a phenomenal listener. And, you know, even in this moment, I'm like, wow, like, you know, you have your inner dialogue where you're like, I wish I can just say this more concisely. But you're such a good listener. You're so inviting, and you provide such beautiful space. And I think in this world, we are all longing for space to expand, to breathe and be able to expand. And everything about the way we live our life is about containment. We are scheduled days. We have budgets, which are helpful. We need constraints to help us not be like out here just floating, we need boundaries to help us do these things. But I think by and large, culturally, at least, in our Western, more American culture, we take these things, and what started off as a beautiful bracelet, has become a shackle. These things that are supposed to provide beautiful structure to our lives, whether it is our careers, maybe how we have income, the way, our religious practices, things that give us structure, that ground us. We take those things and we make them our prisons. We turn them into prison bars. And anytime we have spaces for a little bit of breathing, a little bit of pause, a little bit of freedom, whether it's in a creative space or in a spiritual direction session, or even a conversation like this, it can be overwhelming to be like, wait, I have space. I don't like this. I don't trust myself with all the space. I might expand too much. And then there's not this expansion there. This world, or the life I've built, is not designed for the giantness that I have become. I need to shrink back down. Ooh, that's a workout. I just rather stay small to begin with. At least I can fit all the spaces. And so, and you know what? As a Black woman, as an immigrant child, I get that. There have been spaces where I'm like, I'm gonna choose to be small here because I don't have time to be expanding and contracting, because y'all are not gonna help me recover. So I get it. But I think what a sad thing it is to live our whole lives in every area of our life that way. There are spaces where you hold your breath when you go underwater, but then when you come above water, you can breathe. Finding those spaces where you can breathe, even though you do have to hold your breath underwater, or you have to contract when you're in certain spaces. Art may be a space where you might not feel like you're good at it, but maybe you can expand a bit more and be a little weird, or in a spiritual direction session or in a conversation like this, you could be a little weird and expand. But constraining all the time in every area, not having those spaces to become big and expand and be big and breathe deep and big belly breaths, you don't have spaces to exist that way. We naturally then start to believe that the size that we are, the smallness that we are, is inherent to who we are. That's how we're supposed to be. And then maybe eventually that's how other people should be. So we create systems in which other people have to be small because it's worked for you. Why are you not small too? And then it goes on and on and on.
Yeah.
So I believe that not everyone feels, and maybe not all of your listeners too, but not a lot of people that I encounter or come to a CreatioDivina feels like a religious framework is for them. For them, that might feel like holding their breath because of their experience. Like I call myself a Pentecostal because I believe I have a high pneumatology. I have a high view of the activity of the Holy Spirit in the world. But I know a lot of people who are triggered by Pentecostalism, and because of how it has been harmful to them, how they might have lost a loved one that was sick, and the church told them not to go to the doctor and you need to pray it away, you need to pray it, and they have trauma because of those things. Praying all kinds of things away. It don't work that way. I don't believe things work that way, but it's fine. That's the experience that particular constraint put on them, and they want nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
And my belief is, I always say, God, like, when I was contending with some theological things, as I was doing my own deconstructing and reconstructing my faith, I said, Lord, give me the theology and the perspective that I need to serve the people that you have called me to. I don't need the right theology. I'm not concerned about having the right ideology or the right correct political leaning or the correct whatever the case is, because honestly, we are fallen. We are nowhere near, no matter how correct we are, near God's ideal, God's design, best design. We try and we strive. But my prayer has always been, look, I don't know about this or that, but there's people that maybe you are calling me to in the community that you're calling me to have. Give me the beliefs and the political leanings and the theology that I need to be able to serve the people that will only maybe come to something that I offer. There's something for somebody else. Now, I don't want, as long as I do not want to be harmful. Mm-hmm. And I don't believe what you would give me would be harmful to another human being and their right to live and exist and to expand in the way that makes sense for them. But for those who come to me in CreatioDivina, I want them to feel safe. And that has meant that I have a lot of gray area, like, the gray area theology where I'm like, I feel like God would do it this way in my experience, but God did it that way in your life. I'm fascinated. Tell me more. Listen, and that has been, I think, the gift of these kinds of spaces and the space that you offer up in your offerings. Just, there aren't spaces where we can expand safely. And so, CreatioDivina is one. I'm very grateful for that, but I'm also grateful for the way that you do it in your conversations and in, your clients and the stories that they tell about how they're able to, that's a sacred space.
Yeah.
And, that is worthy of honor, and it is hard work, but we try our best.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that in any creative space, that art or poetry or any of this questions, even they excavate us, right? Like maybe we're a little bit rough or a little bit hardened, and the opportunity to exercise creativity excavates us, and that can be scary. That looks messy before it looks fruitful. It looks messy before it looks fertile. But in order to get to the fertile and the fruitful and the birthing of something new, we've got to do that excavation. And you and I and many of the other creatives we know invite people into a safe space where they can excavate. And I think that can be the most beautiful process. Yeah.
I know this is, I guess, I'm your guest on the podcast, but I have a question for you.
I would love to answer a question.
And talking in the expansion and just like spaces to breathe, I'm always so curious, because a lot of folks that I do CreatioDivina with tend to be the caregivers. Tend to be, the executive directors of certain grant projects or other pastors. And I'm just so curious, as you do your work of helping others breathe and expand, what are your sources of breathing and expansion? Like, what does that look like for you, and how do you bring that to these spaces? And I ask this because even in this conversation, I feel like, wow, like I'm given a lot of space, and it feels like it comes from a richness in your own practice. And so I'm like, I need to know what this is.
Thank you. Thank you for asking that. It's been about a 5-year process of finding that space for myself. And mine was birthed from a hospital room where I was told that I wasn't going to walk out of that room alive, frankly. So I came face to face with that sort of deathbed conversation with God. And it went sort of like this. You're dying. No, I'm not. So are you going to do what I sent you here to do? Yes, I am. And if I leave this place alive, then I will make sure that every single day you and I are in conversation and I'm listening for you to tell me what that next right step is every single day. And that's what it's been. It's been a prayerful presence with God. Like, I have had experiences that, frankly, given my Christian upbringing, people say don't exist or don't make sense. I've come, face to face with a tree and wrapped my arms around it and felt God's presence there deeply. I have sat in meditation or done breath work where I have clearly seen ancestors or heard disembodied voices and been told, these are angels, these are, messengers. And we are. God as I am, we are. There is no separation between you and I and that plant and this rock. And there is no separation because we are all in God. And when you get a really clear, rich sense of that, everything shifts. Like, I've told people, I've heard about people's psychedelic experiences. It sounds like my life every day. Like, I live in this space that feels kind of psychedelic. Like, it's really unreal experiencing that oneness and that presence constantly. Like, God is constantly present with me all the time. And so I attribute the sense of that like people pick up just to having had an experience where God was like, I'm right here. Like, you are in me and I am in you. We are knit together intimately. Yeah. And I had an opportunity to invite God to just be constantly present all the time and to take away like you said, the boundaries of like, well, God, I only want to see you in this way because this is the way I was taught you show up. I said, no, I want to see you in all the ways that you show up. I want to understand every way that you've been present with people so that I can recognize you constantly. So it's been, in terms of practices, it's been, I write a lot. I'm a poet and a writer. So I write poetry all the time. And my poetry, and I think a lot of artists will say this, like, my art, my poetry, whatever I'm creating, doesn't necessarily come from me, it comes through me. So there's this like communion space with God when I'm creating something, that the words just come and I have to do it fast. Like, I've got to get them out because it feels like God is just saying, take this and do something with it, put it out. So it's a creative process constantly. I'm always reading and consuming more because I want to understand how God shows up for people. I just want all of it. I want the richness of that experience. And I can't explain the joy of sharing space with people like this on Zoom, in person. I can't explain the joy of it. It's like God getting to see another part of God's self. It's so exciting. Like, every person I meet, every new experience is so exciting. It's like love explosions. Wow. It's just so special. And getting to have these conversations and like, wow, God allowed me to share this space with people. How incredible. What a gift. I want to do this all the time. It's just such a gift. And I think when we find that calling, when we find that thing that lights us up like that, you can't deny it. You just know. And yeah, it's scary to say, okay, I know it here, but now I've got to bring it out here. And when you put it out here, then everyone else can see it. It's like you're naked, like your inner self becomes your outer self. That's a scary step. I get that. But what you do and what I do and what others do is invite people to just take one little step. Like, let's make this space where it's intimate and there's only a few of us. And then let's make it a little bit bigger. And then let's expand it so that now you are taking the gift that God has put within your soul and you are bringing it in service to the world. And that's where the magic happens.
Wow, I love that. I love that. I love, this idea of, well, first off, so interesting that for both of us, we have this experience of like near death, whether it is a loved one or ourselves.
Yeah.
And it just reminded me of a good friend. His name is Nate Stuckey. He's the director of the farm at Princeton Seminary, and he cultivates the ground, and he's Mennonite, and he's just such a calming presence as well. And he really challenged me once. We were both on the board of a ministry um that was probably about to be sunsetted. Has been sunset. It's been shut down now, but just navigating how difficult it was to shut it down. And he said during one of our final board meetings, what kind of God are we going to choose to believe? Do we really believe in a God of resurrection, or do we believe in a God of resuscitation?
Ooh.
And yeah, right.
Yeah,
And
chills.
he said the difference between resurrection and resuscitation is that when you resuscitate something, you put it on machines, and it you keep it alive, and maybe in some ways it is alive, but you unhook it from those machines, it's out of here. It's But if you allow something, but in order to resurrect, in order for something to be resurrected, it has to completely 100% die, and you have to bury it like a seed. And he talks a lot about composting and the imagery of composting and resurrection. You have to bury it. You have to let it die. And then from that seed or from that burial, something new emerges and resurrects. And it's not likely going to look exactly like what you put into the ground, but like you said, what you put into the ground was good enough, but what comes out of the ground is better. And hearing, what I hear and what you're saying is like there's a story of life and death there, and you chose life.
Yeah.
And in out of the outflowing of you choosing life, you see life in all things, in the tree, and where you see the life. And then even when someone who comes to you or has a conversation with you who may feel a little like I'm out of here, there's something about you that draws that life back out of them. And I just want to say thank you for sharing that, and thank you for your own artistry and your poetry and putting it out there. And um, it's always a joy for me to have conversations with someone and with individuals who in their own way are in their creative space. And it's starting to be a trend. I'm seeing a lot of a lot of have birthed beautiful things out of excuse me, seasons of grief.
Yeah.
And you know yeah, it's I hope that when people hear this conversation um and have even further conversations with you, that is their experience, that even though there is a sadness in having to bury certain things, whether it's a dream or a job or a physical person or a pet or whatever it may be, that there's on the other side of hope for a resurrection of a metamorphosis, like a butterfly, of something beautiful that might not quite look like the thing you put into the ground and put down, but in some ways for where you are is in some ways better. Yeah, it's the creative journey in the journey of life. Like, it'd be interesting to listen back to this in like 20 years and be like, I don't know what I was, maybe I don't know. Or maybe I was like, oh, I thought I knew, but I had no idea. We'll have to come back to this in 20 years, but along the way, we're unfolding more and we're learning more. And the last thing I'll say about my journey is I think that, going into the season, I think I'm in a space where there's parts of my business and there's parts of myself that have to be buried. But now I'm doing it a little bit more voluntarily. As opposed
Yes.
to work from me. I've learned, you start to learn the rhythms and you're like, all right, this is either starting to become unsustainable, which means I'm either in a space of growth or that what I've been doing has been good enough and I'm into the next season of better. And I need to kind of go into my hole and hibernate a bit in the winter to figure out what that better is. And so actually we're at the tail end of my like, yeah, victory lap. And I'm taking all of this in, into my kind of hibernation season where there are a lot of things about my business and BeauFolio and maybe the ways I've been doing CreatioDivina's. It's about to be buried. With the hope that it'll resurrect into something that's so much more better than what I've done before. So thank you for punctuating this season.
I feel really drawn right now to offer you and all the listeners a blessing as we close out. So I'm just going to say thank you right now for being in this space with me. Thank you for accepting the invitation. This has been an incredibly life-giving conversation, and I'm very grateful for you being present for it.
Thank you for having me and for the invitation. And I look forward to our follow-up, maybe before 20 years, but definitely.
Yes, it better be sooner than that. All right. So I pray that all of you listening and Carmelle, that you would receive this blessing. May you give yourself permission to excavate those things that need to be dug up, that need to be maybe buried. May you take the seed of the good enough that has been sown into your life, put it into the fertile ground that God has given you, and find yourself on the other side with or better. Amen.